Hey everyone, I'm Melanie from Streamline Legal, where we help law firms get the most out of their practice management software. Okay, I know you're all looking to get out of here for the holidays, and I am too, but I can't help but notice reading all these Facebook comments about how Clio's tasks are so terrible. And I'm telling you, you've got it all wrong. I agree that there are more robust task programs out there, but that doesn't mean that Clio isn't working correctly. So I'm going to break it down for you and give you 6 tips on how you're using Clio Tasks wrong and how you can improve that and make it really, really work for you. I'm telling you, Clio Tasks are what changed the way that I practice law, and that's no exaggeration. It took my firm from being on the defense to being on the offense. It made us less reactive and more proactive. And so I want to bring that value to you guys as well. So let's go over to Clio and I'll show you my tips for breaking it down. So I'm going to go over to the tasks portion of Clio, and we're going to click on lists here at the top. And again, lists is where the value is at. Lists are what's going to help you push, Clio will help you push that case forward as opposed to you personally having to do it. So let's take a look at one of the lists that I've created here. We're going to start with this real estate sale. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a real estate sale, if it's a modification hearing in family law, if it's an immigration application. There are 100,000 different ways that you can do this. So I'm going to point out a few tips as we go along here. Number 1, when you're creating your lists in Clio's task lists, make sure that you are signifying your tasks with a letter on the front. So just like we would number tasks, we're going to letter tasks. So I've got task A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The reason we do this is that Clio in the list format, when we're looking at the template list, they will only organize them in alphabetical order. And so, of course, that doesn't help me when I'm trying to see them in some type of chronological order. But if I alphabetize them as I put them in chronological order, it'll be a lot easier for me to visualize. And in addition to that, I'll know that once those tasks are in the case in itself in Clio, or in the matter, I should say, I'll know that those came off of a task list, and that can make a difference. So, number 1 is put letters in front of your tasks. Tip number 2 is that when you're using trigger dates, so for example, here we've got a closing date and we've got a date of acceptance on a contract. Anything that's going to trigger you to do something, those I would put put asterisks in front of those. And again, I know these are dates and these are going to go on our calendar as well, but in order to trigger the tasks in Clio, we need to enter them as a task also. And so I'm going to go ahead and put a closing date as a task and a contract date of acceptance, and we'll talk about these in just a minute. So any trigger dates need to have asterisks in front of them so that we know when we put them into the Clio matter that these are dates that we need to adjust and give an actual correct date to. So when I drop this task list into the matter in Clio on the Smith file, I'm going to find the actual closing date and I'm going to edit that date. Instead of the assignment date, I will put in the actual date of closing or the date of acceptance or whatever trigger date I'm looking for. So tip number 3, we can have our tasks triggered from dates that are in the future or dates that were in the past. So for example, in this example, we have the date of acceptance that the contract was signed. That's going to trigger tasks to be done in the future. So for example, if we come down here to this prepare attorney review letter task, we know that that needs to be done 3 business days after the date of acceptance. Okay, so that's why there's a plus there, after. If we look at that task a little more in detail, we see 3 business days after the date of acceptance is when that task is going to take place. So we can trigger things on things that happened in the past, or the same way we can trigger things based on dates in the future. So here we have a closing date, and that's going to happen in the future, of course. And so we're going to go ahead and say for those tasks, we're going to say, call the lender for a financing update. Well, I want to do that 3 weeks before the closing date. So if we look closer at that task, we can see it's 3 calendar weeks before the closing date. Okay, so I can have tasks triggered on both dates in the past or dates in the future. Similarly, I can have tasks triggered on other tasks. So for example, I could say, okay, well, I want to order the title search 2 days after I check on the financing. So we can have tasks based on other tasks, not just the trigger dates. So really, it's really fantastic the way that we can pick whether we're triggering from a date in the past or a date in the future. It really doesn't matter. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this list then to an actual matter so that we can go ahead and see it at work. So here I'm in my white matter, and I'm going to edit the matter. I'm going to scroll down to task automation, and I'm going to go ahead and choose that task list that we were just talking about, that real estate sale. And so then I'll save the matter. And now when I go back to that matter and click on tasks, you'll see that all of my tasks are in here. Okay. And what I need to do very first is I need to look on this list and find all the dates with asterisks, because those are the ones that are going to need to be adjusted so that all the rest of the dates fall at the right time. So this date of acceptance on this file was Monday. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now all the tasks that are triggered off of the date of acceptance have been readjusted. And then I'm going to go back to my closing date, and I'm going to edit that date. The closing date now is going to be at the end of December. In our case, it's going to be December 30th. Okay, so now that I've adjusted both the contract date and the closing date, now all of my tasks have been adjusted to fall in line. And in fact, if we go ahead and sort these by date now, we'll see the date of acceptance, of course, happened in the past. I didn't get the contract until after it was signed. And today, when we put this list in, we need to add the contacts and deadlines to Clio. We need to schedule our contract review with our client and do all of those things that are immediate, right? But then the rest of these dates are all triggered off of either that date of acceptance or the closing date, which is in the future. Okay, so having those tasks that we can trigger based on particular dates is fantastic, I think. And what happens a lot of times is people think, well, the trigger date is on the calendar, and so I can't use it to trigger my tasks. That's not correct. All you need to do is make a task that has your trigger date on it, that is your trigger date, essentially. And then the last tip that I want to share with you guys is number 6, is I want you to keep in mind the idea that we want to break down these tasks. It's pretty rare that we're going to have one list that guides us through the whole case. In a real estate transaction, that might be the case. However, a lot of times, and especially in litigation, where things can take different turns, or in immigration, where we're having to send in an application and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait for a response, anything with time frames like that, it would be a great idea to break your list down into sub-lists. So we're going to have a bunch of mini lists as opposed to one large list that lasts the entire case. So for example, if we're talking about litigation, we might be talking about, reviewing the case with the client, doing all that intake stuff, reviewing the case with the client, reaching out to the other side to try and do some negotiating. If that all fails, then we might bring in our filing list. And our filing list has, draft the complaint, review the complaint, have the client sign the complaint, file the complaint, serve the complaint, and that would be a list in and of itself. And then once we actually get to discovery, maybe that would be a separate list. And so by breaking it down into smaller lists, we can better control what tasks are going to go into the case at what point, and they'll be more accurate because of that. So, to review, here are the 6 tips. Number 1, make sure you letter your tasks so that we can view them more easily in the templated task lists, and so that we recognize they came off of a list when they're in the case. Number 2, trigger dates need to be tasks, and you need to enter them with asterisks so that you or your assistant or whoever is assigned to it can identify those quickly and put the exact dates in there once they're applied to a case. Number 3, you can trigger dates or tasks for dates that occurred in the past. Number 4, you can trigger dates for tasks for dates that occur in the future. And number 5, this isn't a science, this is an art. We know that maybe I'm not ready to prepare the letter on the 28th as is scheduled. That's okay. I can move it out a day or 2. It doesn't make a huge difference in most cases. If there is a exact deadline, we're going to want to put that in there. But this is going to act as a checklist and keep us very close to on track, as opposed to us losing track of where the case is and what we need to be doing. Number 6 is break your list down into smaller lists. So I hope that helps. I hope that helps you get a lot of value out of Clio Task Lists. If you subscribe to Clio, you're paying for it anyway. So give it a try. I think it's really, really going to help your team. And then once you've mastered Clio Task Lists and there are other features that you're really wanting in a more robust task system, absolutely graduate on and start using something else that integrates. So you guys have a great Thanksgiving holiday. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll talk to you soon.